Why hello, this is Jacob from Polysophical. Today I thought it would be interesting to film outside. It's a beautiful day, and this is a beautiful tree. This is almost certainly an Afghan pine. I need to brush up on my pine knowledge because it could also be a Jerusalem pine, and I wouldn't know the difference. But regardless of that, I'd like to talk a bit more about my thesis, if you care to join me. So as I mentioned in the previous video that I did on my thesis, which to recap is ultimately about Joseph Smith, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Ralph Waldo Emerson, the ways in which they fit together in a very unique sort of ideological whole. Something that I did not mention is what I think is a sort of tripartite relationship that overlaps like a Venn diagram between the three of them. And here's what I mean. You have institution builder, and you have spiritual master, something along those lines. Institutionality and spirituality. And for Nietzsche, he is, for example, not an institution builder. He's anti-institution, and he is actually anti-spirituality. So he has this way of being similar to these two religious figures, Joseph Smith and Ralph Waldo Emerson, while also being markedly anti-spiritual, anti-religious, anti-institution. The ways in which they align themselves, the three of them, well, for that you got to watch the first video, but I think the main one is the way in which they treat the body, and they deify the body. And Nietzsche wouldn't like that word deify because it has to do with God, but I think that it is the best way of describing the way in which all three, Emerson, Smith, and Nietzsche, conceptualize the body and the embodied existence of man as something more than just something to be overcome. Oh, no, that's actually not true. They all do believe it is something to be overcome, but in a very specific way, not in the way of Augustine of, oh, well, we're born into these fallen bodies in a fallen world, woe is me. This body must be overcome in the sense that it is prone to error, prone to sin. And Nietzsche, Smith, and Emerson all believe in a different mode of overcoming, in the Übermensch mode of overcoming for Nietzsche specifically, which is the body must be overcome as in over, above, coming above what we already are. Sobrepujar is this Portuguese word that I think of often when I think and contemplate concerning Nietzsche, which is like to push beyond, to go beyond. And that is what all three of them mean when they talk of overcoming the body. It is different than the kind of overcoming that so many Christian thinkers have indulged in over the millennia. But returning to the spirit versus religiosity and institutions and all of these things, I think Nietzsche is clearly anti-spirit, anti-religion, anti-institution. Emerson, very much pro-spirit. He is a pantheist. He believes that God is in all things and that we become like God through this perfecting process of striving and having these essentially revelatory experiences that bring us closer to the divine. This is coming from Emerson. But he did not start a religious sect. He was against all sects. He thought that every person essentially had their own sect within them, and that nobody could tell another exactly how to live their religious life because it was so personal to them. And so he was anti-institution. Joseph Smith, he is clearly pro-spiritual. He is a man of visions and things like this. He has a vision, of the first vision, they call it in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where he sees God the Father and Jesus Christ in a grove of trees in Palmyra, New York. He also is known to have seen all sorts of other angelic visitors. He's a very enthusiastic religious man. Enthusiasm coming from the Greek word en, meaning in, theos, enthusiasmos, theos meaning God. We have the God in us. We have the Spirit in us. So an enthusiastic religion is one that is visibly displaying things that show an inward spirit and fervor. So Joseph Smith is definitely in good company there, given his life and the time period in which he lived in the 19th century, early 19th century America. There were many enthusiastic religious sects. But what Joseph Smith was, which the other two were not, was an institution builder. He was pro-religion, capital R religion, institutionalized religion, which Emerson and Nietzsche were clearly not particular fans of. Why would Joseph Smith do this? Well, I mean, it could be any number of reasons. I think the true believer among us would say he was prompted to do so, and the Christian church has always existed in some form, and it needed to be restored to the way that it originally was, that there was this great falling away and apostasy, and it needed to be restored. But I think there are other reasons that could explain why a religion would be so important to Joseph Smith. I think first and foremost, Joseph Smith was a society builder. He was a town builder. He was mayor of Nauvoo. He had this great vision for Zion, this new Jerusalem that would be built in the west of the United States. As the religion evolved, the institution itself became more about building this grand society and to encode things into a religious structure, into a code of rituals even. What better way is there to bind a society together than through religion and ritual and all of these things, these shared values and ethics and symbols? Jonathan Haidt has certainly taught us as much in his masterwork, The Righteous Mind. Now, this is no sort of get-out-of-jail-free card for Joseph Smith, because to start an institution is always a risk. There is a risk for institutional drift. There is a risk for bureaucratization. There is a risk for all of the things that Nietzsche and Emerson were so afraid of during their time here on Earth. And you could say, well, which one of them had the most influence on the world? Nietzsche is certainly a very famous philosopher. Probably, I would go out on a limb to say that Friedrich Nietzsche is probably the most famous modern philosopher. If you say Nietzsche, most people are going to know, maybe not necessarily who he is and what he taught, but that he is a philosopher and that he was somewhat controversial. Maybe they know of the Übermensch, maybe they know of the anti-Semitism that is in Nietzsche's texts, but again, there's some debate there in terms of what exactly is anti-Semitic versus what's a metaphor. A lot of the anti-Semitism that is attributed to Nietzsche absolutely comes from his sister, who was married to a vehement anti-Semite and hijacked a lot of his records, and that is how it got piped into the Nazi Party later in the 20th century, which is a real shame, because the blot of Nazism that has been attributed to Nietzsche, their sort of vulgarization of the doctrine of the Übermensch, this really gets in the way of a lot of people, I think, of appreciating Nietzsche for what he was trying to do, which is really to wake people up, to bring about a sense of self-recognition, I guess, of the potential within us just as human beings, and that calling to be more than we are now. That's really central to what Nietzsche is all about. It's central to what all three of these men are all about, Smith, Emerson, and Nietzsche. That is called perfectionism as an ideology. To be a perfectionist is to think that there is this perfectibility inherent in the human spirit and that we can achieve it through a moral striving, essentially. Joseph Smith saw that religion is key to this striving, but the other two, Emerson and Nietzsche, saw that religion could in the same breath be a hindrance to that striving. It could coax people into a false sense of security and bind people to certain dogmas and ideas which do not serve them, and perhaps do not serve anybody, but specifically don't serve that individual, and if they don't serve that individual, then they must be broken, they must be washed away so that that person can become perfected in their own way. And Joseph Smith certainly had elements of this in his theology as well. He is a very, how should I say this, expansive thinker. He wanted to pull in truth from wherever it came from, different religions and the sciences and the arts, and everywhere that he could. He wanted to pull in wisdom. Toward the end of his life, he was known to be studying classics and Greek and Hebrew and the Kabbalah. He was a wide learner, even if he wasn't necessarily educated in the colloquial, no, not the colloquial, the common sense of what that would mean. He read diversely but never really attended much schooling, whereas the other two both had their doctorates, Emerson and Nietzsche. They were very well educated. Perhaps that gave them a little bit of an insight into the dogmatism of a higher educational system of any kind, be it a divinity school, be it an academy writ large, be it a religion with its sort of tiers within tiers of insider knowledge and rites and rituals that grant access to different facets of the religion and the benefits, the social benefits that come with being a part of that religion. So these are some of the tensions that are at work between spirituality as I see it and religiosity as I see it, and I'm claiming it within my thesis. I may not write this into my thesis proper, but it just goes to show where my head's at, what I'm thinking about. And I hope that you think it's interesting. I hope that you enjoyed seeing my beautiful face and my chiseled physique. Not so chiseled. I wish it was more chiseled. That way I need to lose some weight. But all that's to say, thank you for joining us. This has been Jacob with the Polysophical Society.